Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I'm coming at you with another Wargaming in Miniature video. In this video, we are continuing our series called Hail Caesar Boot Camp. We are going methodically over all the rules in Hail Caesar, and it's designed for you as a new player of Hail Caesar or a veteran that just wants to learn, maybe get a better understanding of the rules. Also, if you haven't played Hail Caesar and you're interested in maybe learning the rules to decide if you want to play, that's what this series is all about. Now, this is our fourth video. It's called Hand-to-Hand Combat. Okay, so this is the main meat and potatoes of Hail Caesar, this chapter. Okay, so bear with me. This video might go on a little longer. There's going to be a lot of incidences and occurrences that happened during a battle. So what I wanted to do was kind of go over all of that with you. Now here it is. How combat works. Units begin hand-to-hand fighting by charging their enemy in the command part of the turn. Okay, if you haven't watched the previous videos, please be sure to watch, because the first video we talk about orders, and the second video we talk about movement, and then the third video we talk about range attacks, and in this video we're going to talk about hand-to-hand combat. So you begin hand-to-hand by charging your enemy in the command part of your turn. Once opposing units have moved into touch, they exchange blows as described in the rules below. Once both sides have struck blows and casualties have been determined, the side that has inflicted the most casualties is deemed to have won. The units on the losing side must then take a break test to determine if they hold, give ground, or break, in which case they are destroyed. Now, the results of break tests are actually going to be done in the chapter after hand-to-hand combat. There's multiple times, multiple reasons and occurrences for a break test, not just hand-to-hand. You could have shooting break tests. You could have moving through other units break tests. Okay, so we'll talk about break tests probably in the next video. Okay, what is an engagement? An engagement consists of opposing units that are fighting each other plus all those adjoining units judged to be supporting. Okay, the role of supporting units is described in depth later. For now, the important thing to remember is that both fighting and supporting units form part of the same engagement. So here's an example. This being red 2. This being blue 1. That's just what they're calling. Okay, that's the fight. Now, if there was a unit here, that would be considered, if this was a second unit, this unit would be supporting this unit in that fight. Also, if this unit was here, this unit could be supporting that unit in that fight. It could also be like that. So if they're not, even though this unit is not touching, it could still be supporting by being beside it. Okay, in situations where more than one unit is fighting on each side, all units that are mutually fighting form part of the same engagement together with an associated supported unit. So imagine this unit being here and this being a second unit being there, right? This is two engagements. You have this engagement and that engagement, because this unit cannot also support this while it's busy fighting that. A unit is defined as fighting in hand-to-hand combat engagement where its center front or leader position is either touching the enemy or an enemy's center front or leader position is touching it. Oh, okay. Well, in this case, because this center is touching this unit, this would be fighting him. Basically, where the leader position touches an opposing unit, the units are deemed to be fighting. Units that are engaged in combat at the start of the command part of the turn cannot move either using their initiative or by means of an order. The only exceptions are units that have a special rule entitling them to move out of combat. But these are rare and exceptions to the rules. So once you're in it to win it. Units engaged in combat cannot make ranged attacks, nor are they eligible targets. A charge move is a move intended to bring a unit into contact with an enemy. Often, charging unit will make several moves one after another, but only the final move into touch is the charge move. So let's say we've got this guy here, this guy's there, this guy's here, this guy's there. Okay, whatever. And the guy gives this guy an order and he says charge that unit there. Okay, let's say he has 3 moves. Well, he goes 6 inches, but he's within 12. So he moves 6 inches, that's not the charge move, and then this portion of the move is the charge move. A charge does not necessarily represent a pell-mell dash upon the enemy's lines, though it might. A charge could equally well be measured advanced, or even a more drawn-out process involving some initial skirmishing before opposing ranks close. We therefore employ the term charge because it is usually dramatic and memorable rather than because it's a literal description of how the unit is moving. So, during the order phase, you state your intention to charge, state the unit that's charging, state the target that you're going to charge. Now, because the enemy might be allowed to react to this potential, you got to let them know, basically. Unless a unit is specifically instructed to charge, it will not do so, although that might happen due to a blunder order. Now, before we proceed further, it is worth saying that a unit can be ordered to charge an enemy beyond its maximum reach, as this saves excess measurement and gets troops moving in the right direction without any fuss. No advantage is ever allowed to a unit doing so. Any bonuses to command or free moves that otherwise apply to charges are only taken into account when the enemy is within reach. Units not allowed to charge. Units that are already engaged in combat. Disordered units. Shaken units. Columns or squares. Artillery. Open order. Cavalry or chariots against pike formations. Cavalry and chariots are not allowed to charge home onto the front of a pike phalanx unless the pike phalanx is already shaken or disordered. Open order units are not allowed to charge an enemy or infantry cavalry unless these are also open order. Now, troops in open order can charge enemy occupied buildings. Units in column or square formation cannot charge the enemy. Columns can be given an order to reform into a fighting formation and then charge, but cannot charge while they remain in column. Squares can't move, making it impossible to charge. A unit that is shaken cannot charge. So shaken units are those that have suffered casualties equal to their stamina. Basically, you've taken them out of the fight once they've hit their shaken level. Units that are disordered cannot be given orders and cannot move on their initiative. So how can they charge? Okay, there's no rule saying that infantry can't charge cavalry, although on the whole it's a rather reckless thing to do and likely to end in tears. Mounted troops attacked in this way are allowed to countercharge in most cases and will usually spell disaster for an opposing infantry unit. We're getting into countercharge. Making your charge move. Remember that a charge move is specifically the final move into contact. So in the case of a unit making 3 moves, only the 3rd move is the charge move as we define it. A unit can only make a charge move at an enemy unit in its facing. This means that it must be able to see the target, and the target must be directly in front of its center front or leader position. Charge range is measured from the center front. So, like, what they're trying to say is, if I have a unit here and it's angled that way, even though you're in my front, you're not directly in front of my leader, so I can't charge you. You have to put yourself in a position where you can charge. Charge range is measured from the center front of the leader model to the closest part of the enemy. If the target is within 1 move distance of the leader, then the whole unit is allowed to charge regardless of the distance any individual model may move. Some models will often end up moving further than the normal move allowance. This does not matter. Think of the unit quickening its pace. Okay, position charger. In most cases, opposing units will be facing each other and the charger will align against the front of the target in a straightforward manner. We'll consider situations where a unit charges against the flank or rear of an enemy in a moment. But for now, just imagine the charge is heading for the front of its target. The charging unit must bring its own center front and as a greater proportion of both units' frontages into touch as possible. In most cases, this will simply result in the units aligning against each other. So you would just go, right? Not like that. That's not a charge. Not like Napoleon's battles, right? If you hit like this, just take these guys and put them like that. There you go. Units that start their move off to one side of their target will usually align to the corresponding side of the enemy's formation as shown below. This gets the greatest proportion of both units into touch in the most direct manner. So you try to go center to center as best as possible. So imagine, hopefully you can kind of see this on the screen. You got this unit here, but he's a little bit off to the side. Now when this guy charges this guy, you don't take him and put him directly in the center. I don't, even because you notice he's wider than he is. I don't go like that. I do go to the closest possible portion of the bases where I'm fully in contact. So basically I just line the sides up. Okay, charges to the flanks and rear. So far we only talked about the front. If a charging unit is positioned within the target's front quarter, when the order is received, then it must attempt to make the charge to the target's front. Okay, now you remember the front quarter, right? The front quarter is from 45-degree angles out, right? This unit is in this unit's front quarter. He has to charge the front. Notice that this is the position the charger is in before any moves are made. Bear in mind that this means that it is not possible to order a unit to charge an enemy in the side if the charger lies in the enemy's front when the order is received. If it's given that order, then it will have to position itself for a future turn. So basically, if you've got a unit here and he's still in his front and he says, I want you to charge his side, what this unit will accomplish or do will be to prepare. It'll get into the side ready to charge the side. And then on the following turn, you would be able to charge the side. Often a charger will not lie wholly within a quarter of the unit when the order is given, but will straddle 2/4. And that's kind of what I'm showing here, right there. So if this is the quarter line, you notice how it straddles 2/4. In such case, the charger counts as in the quarter occupied by its front center. So in this case, wherever that position is, if that is in the side, which it looks like, yeah, it's so close, it's hard to tell. But yeah, it looks like he would be able to charge the side. If it is in doubt, players must defer to the umpire. When charging into the flank of an enemy, or into any facing that is essentially narrow, it is important to make sure that the center front of the charger contacts the enemy unit. So remember, the center front of the charger must be touching the unit. So not like this, not like that. It's got to be in here somewhere. All right, good deal. Okay, charging 2-on-1. In most cases, opposing units will have comparable frontages, and combats are therefore fought 1-on-1 with supporters. However, if opposing units have significantly different frontages, there can sometimes be room for 2 or more units to fight a single enemy. The following rules describe that's normally allowed. Okay, so let's say we got 2 of these units and we got 1 of these units. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but we're just going to go with it. Where charging units move one after the other against the same enemy, it is simply a matter of moving each unit in turn against whatever portion of the target unit is accessible to them. Where 2 or more units charge against the same enemy as a division order, units must still move one after an order for sake of clarity, and it's up to the player which unit he moves first. Depending on which unit moves first, this may or may not leave room for a second unit to charge and fight. So if you had multiple units and you moved one in and it covered the whole front, then the second one wouldn't be able to make it. But because there is enough room, he could charge in and he could charge in. Okay, the most common situations here is small units or narrow-based units such as elephants. Where a target is already engaged, a second unit is allowed to complete a charge so long as its leader can see either the enemy unit or could see the enemy if it were not already engaged. The enemy unit must still lie directly in front of the leader, and the charger is allowed to draw a line of sight through friendly engaged units that are in the way. This just allows for the practicalities of moving units one after another and makes provisions for units to join combats that are underway where common sense demands they would. So here we go. Let's explain that rule. Okay, let's say I've got two units here like this. All right. And this guy says, he says, I'm going to charge by division into this unit. And he succeeds. So he takes this unit and charges them in. Okay. Now, remember, this unit's front, you have to measure a line straight ahead from your center of your unit to the enemy. This unit would normally block line of sight or whatever to this unit, but it doesn't. You basically treat that guy as non-existent. Okay? So yes, he could charge this unit. Now, you just decide to place this unit to either the left or right side in contact. It's that simple. Okay, charging 1 against 2. In some situations, enemy units will be positioned in such a way that charging 1 will automatically bring another unit into touch. Okay, so a lot of times, units, armies, will set up side by side, perfectly side by side. And I've got a unit here, but I want to charge him. But if I do that, it's going to put, even if I put my center as far over to the right as possible or the far left as possible, I'm still going to be charging these guys as well. Adjacent units will fight in the center front position clearly contacts the charger if the charger's center front contacts them. In such cases, the unit is treated as having been charged. It is allowed to react. Units adjacent to the target, this guy, will not fight if their center front or leader model position does not clearly touch the charger. Okay, so if they were there, right, then they would not. So a unit that is not fighting may not react as if charged. The unit will probably be able to support in the engagement. Not in this case because he's not side by side. But if they were like side by side touching, then note that the obligation to cover an adjacent unit can result in the charger's center front touching a different unit to the intended target. This is fine as long as the original target is still fighting, where the obligation to cover the adjacent target would otherwise result in the original target not fighting. Okay, they're showing in the example, they're showing an example of a unit set like that and a unit set like this. And because I have to cover this unit, okay, when I charge that unit, I have to, I'm kind of stuck to making sure that I cover this unit. And when I do that, my center of my unit still touches this guy, even though my original plan was to charge this guy. I know that's a little convoluted, but that's what it's saying. Okay, but the last paragraph breaks it down. It's worth pointing out that we take a fairly lax attitude to the exact number of models in our units, and the widths of different units do therefore tend to vary within certain limits. Where this is the case, it is important not to confer an unintentional advantage when it comes to one-on-one or two-on-one engagements, simply because a unit's width Sometimes the unit that is touching and its center would not be so if it were a little wider. This is the case for judgment, either by the players or the umpire. So what they're saying is, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. You charge, it happens. You touch multiple units, that's okay. Charging with open order units. As we've already explained, troops in open order are not allowed to charge enemy infantry or cavalry, unless they too are open order or sheltered within buildings. Units in open order are also not allowed to charge if doing so would bring an adjacent unit of a type that they could not otherwise charge into combat. So basically, if they're open order and but there is an open order unit in front of them, yeah, they could normally charge them. But if there's adjacent to that open order unit a closed order unit, and it would force them to make contact with the closed order unit, they can't do it. They're restricted. Yeah, so when an open order unit charges another open order unit, don't really worry about it. Just move your models up and put them close and touching and base-to-base contact with the front rank or whatever. Yeah, open order units can like intermix and stuff like that. It gets a little crazy. But basically what they're saying is just move them up and have them touch. Okay, charge responses. Depending upon the situation, a unit that has been charged can opt to make one response. Only units that are not already engaged can respond. Units that are already engaged will always stand. The players whose unit has been charged must declare its response before the opponent makes its move. We assume units that would normally advance to meet their enemy to do so, even though the response in the game is to stand and the models themselves are not moved. This is why we give all units a unique value for their first turn, a hand-to-hand fighting called the clash value. When you look at your when you look at your stat sheet, you have two hand-to-hand values. You have the clash and the sustained. Stand. This is one of your responses. Stand. Default response, you don't move. Closing shots. If you have a long-range weapon, you can take a closing shot with minuses. Evade. Only units in open order can attempt to evade. Evading, you try to avoid combat by turning and running. Countercharge. A cavalry or chariot unit that has been charged to its front can elect to countercharge, assuming it would be allowed to charge. Turn to face. A cavalry or elephant unit that is charged to the flank or rear can respond by pivoting to face the enemy. If it's to your front, you countercharge. If it's to their side or rear, they turn. And the last response is Parthian shot. So what I'm seeing here is there's not really a whole lot of charge responses. There's closing shots, countercharge, turn to face, and that's pretty much it, unless you got special abilities. Okay, evade. Only units in open order are allowed to try to evade from a charge. An evade interrupts the regular flow of play and takes place out of the normal turn of sequence. The attempt is made once it has been established the charger can charge into contact, but before moving the charging unit. So they measure to see and all that. A unit that evades successfully cannot evade again if charged by another enemy unit that turn. If charged a second time, the unit is obliged to stand. The evade move takes place exactly like a move given in the command phase and requires an order in the usual way. In the case the order is evade and the order is issued successfully, the unit is moved as far as possible, 1, 2, or 3 moves, into the quarter opposite the charger. In the case of an evade order, if the test is failed, the evaders can still move once. So evaders will always move 1, 2, or 3 moves depending upon their role. If the evade order is given by the Army General, the result can be re-rolled in the usual way. Once the evaders have moved, the Chargers complete their move, depending on how many moves the Chargers have. They may be able to catch the evaders. They may be able to find the evaders have moved beyond range. In either case, the Chargers must attempt to complete their order in the usual manner. If evaders have moved through other enemy in their rear, then the Chargers can potentially charge these troops if the order has been framed in a suitable manner. So basically, if you've got a unit here and there, and let's say these guys charge these guys, and these guys evade, exposing these guys could technically continue to charge those guys, depending on how you worded your order. The Chargers complete their move. Okay. Evaders are automatically destroyed if the enemy catches them. You heard that, right? Evaders are automatically destroyed if their enemy catch them. The unit is removed from the table. The Chargers are treated as having beaten their enemy in hand-to-hand fighting and have the same option as described for the victorious units. See break test. If evaders are not caught, and assuming Chargers do not redirect their charge to another unit indicated by their order, then Chargers are left high and dry and the normal sequence of play resumes. The evading unit is not otherwise penalized and can continue to move normally in their player's turn. It can happen the unit attempting an evade rolls a blunder, in which case we would suggest the unit rolls its blunder and acts accordingly. Even with a blunder, there is a good chance of a unit moving away from the charger and out of reach. Alright, countercharge. A cavalry or chariot unit that is charged with front by another unit of any kind can respond with a countercharge. Units charged to the flank or rear cannot countercharge. So if you're disordered or shaken, you're not allowed to countercharge. Units in open order cannot countercharge formed units. Open order units can countercharge other open order units, assuming they are otherwise able to do so. A countercharge interrupts the regular flow of play and takes place out of the normal turn sequence. A countercharge requires no order and can be enacted automatically so long as the charger would otherwise contact its target. For example, if a charger is 3 moves from its target, then the countercharge is allowed if the charger rolls either 2 or 3 moves. Note that this means a countercharge is possible even in some situations where the chargers would fail to contact their target. Make the charges and counterchargers move simultaneously. Establish a point equidistant between both units so they contact in that position. Both the charger and the countercharger are treated as having charged, and both units received all the combat bonuses as if charging, including any bonuses from weapons or special rules. If cavalry or chariots countercharge against infantry, other than those in open order, then the infantry are automatically disordered and receive no 2-hit bonus for charging. So it's like you just stopped him from charging. This does not apply if chargers are infantry in open order. Open order infantry can charge chariots or open order cavalry without becoming disordered. They are not allowed to charge formed cavalry, so the situation will not arise. If cavalry or chariots countercharge, then any other cavalry or chariots already positioned to support them in hand-to-hand combat can move with them and take part in the ensuing combat. Just move the supporting units along with the countercharges. That's cool. It's kind of like they're locked at the hip. Okay, turn to face. A formed cavalry or elephant unit that is charged to the flank or rear can respond by pivoting to face the enemy if it has room to do so, or simply turning about or charge in the rear. Units that are already disordered are not allowed to turn. A turn to face interrupts the regular flow, takes place out of the normal sequence of play. No order is required. Turn happens automatically. If charged to its flank, the unit is pivoted to confront the enemy head-on. If it's not possible to pivot sufficiently to bring the charge within its front quarter, the charger is then arranged against the front of the unit in the usual way. Okay, so if I can't turn my model to face the chargers, it forces the chargers to move against my front. Okay, so that's just a model positioning thing around the table where you charge me in the flank, but I get to turn, but because of the way the terrain is or the table or other units, because I can't actually physically turn the model, you as a attacker are forced to put your models in my front. Fighting. Okay, so we figured out how to get into combat. Now let's figure out how to do the combat. Regardless of which side's turn it is, every unit engaged in combat takes part every turn. All units that are fighting, fight. And all units that are supporting, support. Because combat happens every turn, we often refer to combat in terms of rounds. So in blue's turn, fight a round of combat. In red's turn, fight a round of combat. When in blue's turn, another round of combat, and so on until the engagement is over. During each round, it is usual to work out one engagement in its entirety, then another, and so on until all engagements on the tabletop have been fought. So, if opposing cavalry are fighting each other on the western side of the table, while two groups of skirmishers are engaged in the eastern side, it would be usual to pick one engagement, say the cavalry, and work out that completely, including any results and break tests, before turning to the skirmisher battle and resolving that in the same way. The players whose turn it is decides which order of the battles it takes place. This can be an advantage, as units that are victorious in the engagement can potentially move into or influence another. This really happened a lot in our Napoleon's Battles games, where cavalry had this recall move, so like when you blew up a unit, you could take your cavalry and continue on and destroy other units. It was pretty devastating. Okay, attacks. In reality, units in hand-to-hand combat obviously strike at the same time. However, for the sake of our game, it is convenient to work out all the attacks from one side, including any supporting attacks, and then all the attacks from the other side. It doesn't strictly matter which side strikes first, because it's all considered simultaneous. Hand-to-hand attacks are worked out the same way as ranged attacks. So roll a die for each attack value and establish the number of hits inflicted on the enemy. The enemy makes morale saves if he has them, and any hits that are not saved are turned into casualties, recorded against the unit's stamina value. Two different combat attack values are used when fighting hand-to-hand combat. The unit's clash value is used during the first round of the engagement, and the unit's sustained value is used on subsequent rounds of the same engagement. In both cases, the value indicates the number of dice rolled, same way as for range attacks. Depending on the situation, we tend to refer to either of these values as the unit's combat value. Combat value for troops whose primary role is to fight hand-to-hand typically lie within the range of 6 to 9 for standard-sized units. If the unit is tiny, small, or large, it gets pluses to its dice. So tiny units roll 1 die, small units get -2 die, large units get +2 die. Where a typical combat value is 6, they roll 6 dice for a standard-sized unit, 8 if they're large, 4 if they're small, and 1 if they're tiny. Now these adjustments are already made on the basic stat line. We use these modifiers as a rule of thumb. They are not inviolable instructions handed from the heavens by Jove himself. If a scenario calls for something else, then do it. Units in column, square, occupying buildings can only attack in a very limited way. The combat values are automatically reduced as shown on the table. So basically, if you're in column, you get 1 die. If you're in square, you get 2 dice per face. And if you're a building, you get 2 dice per face. And only up to your total of your combat value. To make your attack, you're looking for 4, 5s, and 6s. That's kind of a rule of thumb in the game, 4, 5, or 6s. So if one unit rolls all these dice, because he had a 6 combat value, I would have got 4 hits and 2 misses. Okay, regardless of the modifiers, a roll of a 1 is always a miss, and a 6 is always a hit. There's no such thing as an automatic hit or miss. Even if my to hit numbers of 1 or better. If I roll a 1, I fail. If you're being attacked in the front and the rear, at least half of your attacks must be against the large, like if you have an odd number, the larger number needs to be against the unit to the front. If you're charging, you get a +1 to hit. If you're winning, you get a +1 to hit. If you're uphill, you get a +1 to hit. If you're shaken or disordered, you get a -1. If you're open order, you get a -1. If you're attacking to the flank or rear, you get a -1. And then morale saves, same as before. The +1 bonus for cover, +2 for buildings, and +3 for fortifications do apply, but only if you were stationary and you were charged. And those bonuses continue to apply each round until you lose a round of combat. For the avoidance of doubt, a unit that charges an enemy behind cover does not benefit from the cover itself, even where the barrier physically separates both units. Only units that take up position within cover receive the bonus. This could be obvious enough, but just understand it. Okay. Casualties. Once morale saves have been taken, any hits that have not been saved are recorded as casualties on the unit, as with ranged combat. So these 4 hits on this guy over here, well, I'm sorry, he's already had so many hits. This guy just took 4 hits because I didn't save any of them. As with ranged combat, casualties inflicted in hand-to-hand combat represent men killed or wounded, as well as factors that might affect the unit's ability to fight, such as exhaustion and loss of nerve. Casualties are recorded onto the unit markers, as always. During the round, it's important to keep separate tally of the casualties inflicted on a unit in the current round. This can most easily be done by carefully keeping any fresh markers separate from casualties inflicted previously. So, like, let's say this guy had a 1 damage on the previous round, and on this round you did 3 more. So we put a 3 there, maybe behind him, or maybe we keep the 1 behind him and we just put this like, this is what we just did in this fight. And then when it's all over, we convert this to a 4, but that at least you were able to keep track that you took 3 in that 1 round. And why is that important? Well, to determine who wins. Once the combat has been worked out, the results establish the break test taken. All casualties suffered in the excess of a unit's morale value are removed. These excess casualties are either redistributed among supporting units, as described later, or discarded altogether. Once a unit is shaken, casualties have reached a stamina value. Casualties must still be recorded for purposes of determining winners, establishing if units are shattered, and for taking break tests. Okay, so like if I already had 5 on me and I just took another 7, hypothetically, let's say I could take 7, then I'm instantly destroyed because that's double my stamina. Or if I just took 7, well, that would count against me in the who won the fight. Okay, we're going to close ranks. Shield-carrying heavy infantry units fighting in battle line formation are allowed to close their ranks during any round of hand-to-hand combat except for the initial round if the unit is charged. This represents the unit drawing into a kind of dense synaspismos formation associated with hoplite warfare and the shield wall of Dark Age infantry. Only heavy infantry units equipped with shields are allowed to do this. This is a useful way of reducing the number of casualties likely to be inflicted by both sides that round. If a player wishes a unit to close ranks, he must say so before either side strikes blows. Once a unit has closed ranks, it fights with a -1 to hit penalty when making its own attacks, but adds a +1 bonus when making its morale saves. So a unit that would normally hit on a 4 or better and save on a 4 or better will instead hit on a 5 or better and save on a 3 or better. So it's harder to hit, but also harder to be hit. Okay, closing ranks only takes effect for a single round, so if a player wishes his troops to close ranks throughout the combat, he must announce that he's doing that at the start of each round. So basically, there's no way to, you don't mark it, you just tell them. Okay, supports. Supports are positioned either alongside or behind fighting units in such a way that they can be imagined contributing to the combat, either with missiles, by relieving fighting troops, or by striking blows themselves. Units in open order, artillery, and baggage fighting in hand-to-hand combat cannot be supported by other units of any kind. In these cases, the fighting units are either too dispersed or represent too few combatants to benefit from supporting friends. Units fighting from buildings cannot normally be supported, although they can be supported by other units in the same building, if it's large enough to hold them. Units in square or testudo formation cannot be supported by other troops because of their close and, in some case, the square multi-directional formation. Units in wedge formation can only be supported by friends enclosed within the wedge. Units that cannot be supported in hand-to-hand combat are listed below. Open order, artillery, baggage, cavalry cannot be supported by elephants. Units in buildings, except troops in the same building. Units in square, testudo, wedge, except those enclosed in the wedge. Scythe, chariot. Practically all units are allowed to support apart from baggage units. Heavy and medium are unable to support because they lack the necessary short-range combat value. And elephants are not allowed to support cavalry. Okay. Disordered units are not allowed to move in the command part of the turn and are generally obliged to retreat. In any case, even where allowed to move, disordered units cannot use it to join an engagement as a support. Engaged units. Units that are already engaged in combat are already fighting and supporting and can't move other than is dictated by the result of the combat. Shaken units. Units that are already shaken cannot move or join engagements as a support. Shaken units are those that have suffered casualties equal to their stamina value, like that guy and that guy. Column, square, and wedge, heavy and medium artillery, elephant supporting cavalry, side tier. Okay, I already mentioned all that. Units supporting from a flank must be positioned beside the fighting unit and aligned with its front. Alternately, the supporting unit can be hinged at the front of the fighting unit and inclined toward the enemy along the line shown. So basically what they're saying is, hypothetically, okay, let's say this guy is engaging this guy, and this guy is supposed to be supporting him. He can be inclined like this to represent that he is supporting. Either way, a fighting unit can only ever be supported by one unit to each of its flanks and never two. When arranging supporters in this manner, we have never found it necessary to insist on absolute precision, as we happily allow units to align to support as shown as long as at least part of the unit can reach the fighting unit's front. Thus we allow for the practices of play to avoid the game becoming overly enslaved to Euclid. Okay, so you can support either by being directly to the side, angled in, or directly behind. Or actually, you can support there as well, as long as your front center is behind your friend. In many situations, a unit moving into support will touch the enemy as shown below. The unit is still supporting as long as its center front does not touch the enemy unit. So, let's kind of move this guy out of the way. Let's turn this into two groups of three. Okay. So let's say this is the... Okay, let's say this unit's fighting, and this unit is moving in to support. And normally he would just go boop right there. Now he's touching him, but it's okay to support because his front center does not engage him. Because he doesn't engage him, he's supporting. He's not fighting. Remember, this has to be touching your enemy, like so, and like so. If it was like that, then they'd both be fighting. It'd be a 2-on-1 and not a support. Okay, supporting units make their attacks in a comparable way to fighting units. These attacks are always struck against the same enemy as the attacks of the unit they are supporting. If their friend is fighting more than one enemy, then flank supports strike against the closer target, and the rear support attacks are divided in the same proportion of the fighting unit's own attacks. The number of supporting attacks is the short range value for the unit. So basically, a supporter is considered to be using their short range attacks value. Not their sustained, not their melee, not their clash, their short range value. They're throwing javelins in to help or whatever. Roll the dice, score hits, no dice bonuses to hit applied for supporting units for either charging or winning because they're just supporting. Hits scored by supporting units are treated exactly as other hits. Morale saves are taken, and any hits that fail to save are converted to casualties. As a fighting unit can take casualties from enemy it is fighting and from 3 supporting units, it's entirely possible to suffer a great many casualties during large combats. So what they're saying is, I'm going to make 3 units of 2. Okay, if I was long enough. Okay, or here, we'll just pull him off to the side. Let's say, yeah, here we go. He's fighting him. He moves up. Now he's supporting him with his ranged value. He moves up. He's supporting him with his ranged value. He moves up. He's supporting him with his ranged value. So you get all these guys and him fighting him. He uses his clash or his sustained if it's the second round, and these guys all use their short range value. And if they all get double their stamina, poof, he's going to blow up. Okay, combat results. Here it is. Combat results are worked out for each engagement as soon as all units taking part in that engagement have fought, including supports. To work out which side wins, add the number of casualties inflicted by each side during that round. Do not include any casualties inflicted by closing or traversing shots. So that initial round of shooting, don't count that. The side that inflicted the most casualties is victorious, and the other side has been defeated. And if it's the same, then it's a draw. The fighting unit that has been defeated may be destroyed outright. Such units are described as shattered. So if it's double their stamina, you know. Otherwise, it's obliged to make a break test to determine whether it breaks and is destroyed, if it gives ground, or if it holds ground undaunted. And that's all done during the break test rules. Coming up pretty okay. Reallocating casualties. Remember, when he fights, he puts all of his hits on this guy. As soon as you have worked out which side has won, make a note of the difference of the number of casualties scored by each side that round. For example, if one side has scored 4 casualties and the enemy scores 7 casualties in return, then the enemy has won the combat by 3. The value affects the result of the subsequent break test, so it is important to establish the first before doing anything else. Once you have worked out which side has won and by how much, identify any fighting units that are shattered and remove them immediately. Shattered units are those that have lost their combat and sustained a total of at least double their stamina value. Such units are destroyed without recourse to a break test. Note that only fighting units that are defeated can be shattered, not units that win or draw a combat. Okay, so if I cause 12 wounds to you, but you cause 13 wounds back at me, you're not shattered. Even though you took 12, you won by 1, and you won the combat. But because I took more than 12, or double my stamina, I would be dead. Okay. Once you have removed shattered units, take any excess casualties inflicted on fighting units from both sides, and redistribute them amongst their supporting units. Excess casualties are those in excess of the unit's stamina value. Excess casualties are those in excess of the unit's stamina value. So a unit with a stamina of 6 and which has a total of 8 casualties has 2 excesses. Oh, so even if I get shattered with 12, okay, that would leave me, okay, if I took 13, then that's 7 over. Wow, okay. Excess casualties are distributed amongst each fighting unit's supports and as equally as possible, starting with the supporting units that are touching the enemy. Otherwise, the only player can choose which units suffer the casualties. If a defeated unit has no supports, any excess casualties are simply removed. Where a supporting unit already has its maximum number of casualties, any additional casualties occurred to it are also removed. Supporting units cannot be shattered as a result of redistribution of casualties. Okay, so even if I had 7 more, and let's say I had only 1 supporter, he would take all 7. And if he already had 6, he would not be shattered. He would just be wasted, basically. It basically hurts those that are not damaged at all. The most number of casualties a unit can have once reallocation is complete is its stamina value. Break test. Once an engagement has been fought, results worked out, and any casualties reallocated to supports as necessary, the side that has been defeated must take a break test. for each surviving unit that is fighting the enemy. This won't be necessary if the unit has been shattered, obviously, because he's destroyed, as shattered units are destroyed automatically and already explained. Note that a separate break test is taken for each fighting unit in the engagement, so it is possible for one unit to hold its ground while another breaks. For example, only fighting units test initially. Supporting units don't automatically need to take a break test when their side loses a combat. Supports only have to test if the unit they are supporting is shattered, or if the unit that are supporting breaks. Okay, so in this situation, if the center unit, okay, because like this is a supporting unit, this is a supporting unit, and this is a supporting unit, if this unit is shattered, then these guys test. If this unit rolls and fails its break test and becomes routed or just broken, then they have to make a break test. In the case of a draw, fighting units from either side must take a break test if they are shaken. This can result in opposing units both giving ground or even breaking and being destroyed in some cases. Supporting units are not required to test if drawn, even if they're shaken, unless the unit that they're supporting breaks, as if it was defeated. Alright, last point. Once a fight has been resolved, units are often left in place facing each other, in which case the combat engagement continues into the following turn. Few engagements will be resolved in one round of fighting, especially between equally matched close fighting infantry. Sometimes the losing side will give ground, moving away from the enemy, in which case the victors have a choice whether to follow up or to continue the engagement. This is covered in the section of break tests, along with the rules for moves resulting from combat. Alright guys, thanks for coming out and checking out this video. That's the end of the combat rules explained. And then what we'll do is we'll go into break tests on the next video, and when to make break tests and what the results of break tests, retreats, and hand-to-hand combat test results, and supporting units and all that. And then we'll go into commanders and victory and defeat, troop types, and special abilities in following videos. Okay, so the break tests, or the morale rules basically, is the next video, and I'll see you then.